So welcome back to the AecHive podcast. I'm Ralph Montague. I'm a director of ArcDocs. I'm joined by John Egan, co-founder of AecHive and director of BIM Launcher. John, do you want to introduce yourself and say hi to everybody?
Hi everyone, delighted to be back with an old friend to discuss some innovations in construction industries.
We're in Scotland today, the country of inventions, everything from the steam train to the telephone. We're very pleased to have Ryan Tennyson from Scottish Futures Trust with us. Ryan, you're very welcome and appreciate your time. Do you want to give us a brief introduction about yourself and what you're doing?
Hi everyone, and thanks guys for asking me to be here today. And yeah, hi from sunny Scotland, which is great for to have such good weather at the moment. No pressure in terms of historic inventions and living up to that and what we do. But particularly I'll tell you some of the good work that we're doing at the moment within SFT and just more generally. Yeah, a bit about myself. Really, my background is architecture. I love architecture. Professionally, I'm an architectural technologist, so a proud member of the CIIT for many years. I guess from going from architecture to where I am today has been not a planned journey like most people in our industry. Sort of fell into sort of certain roads along the way. But most of it has been sort of born out of frustration. So sort of going back a good maybe 10 years ago, I was running projects and delivering schools within Scotland, and really was very frustrated about the whole delivery process and how the issues and collaboration and all that sort of good stuff, how there was obstacles in that. And really it was just pre-last recession, and really started to move and focus more on design management with a view of maybe moving into that as a career change. So during the last recession, I undertook a master's in design management, and really through that fell into BIM. It was sort of in around 2011 when the UK government was sort of launching what they were doing with the UK BIM task group. And yeah, so I started to really think about how projects are delivered, design management, and really where BIM sat in the context of that. Back then I was reading a lot with the likes of John Egan, the Design and Management Handbook. There was a guy called Stephen Emmett who was doing a lot of work around design management and collaboration. And I wrote a dissertation in 2012 which was entitled "Is BIM the Panacea for the UK Construction Industry?" And that was really even before the UK BIM task group and the mandate had been launched. And really what that was exploring was, is BIM, first of all, what is it? Is that in terms of a definition? And is it really going to solve the sort of the historical problems that we have in our industry? The likes of Egan and Latham had identified in their reports way back in the 90s. And is BIM going to solve that?
So what was the conclusion of your dissertation? Is it the panacea? Is it the answer to our problems?
Yeah, it was a bit of a crystal ball back then, and I did carry out some industry research. And from memory, when you Googled BIM back then, it was just white papers on the internet, mainly. A lot of technology, and obviously Revit, Autodesk were out and about then doing stuff. So I had to really undertake a survey and try and, through LinkedIn, zone in on certain groups that were starting to come up through the ranks and be active, and really just test the water in that respect, and then understand that in the context of what good design management is. The conclusion was that BIM wasn't the panacea, obviously, but BIM, whatever it was, whether it was process or technology, was certainly an enabler. But there was also a risk that I discovered back then, that potentially there was a negativity to it in the context that it could actually create a two-tier industry, where a part of industry could be left behind and a chunk of industry would go forward. So that's, I guess, and I haven't really thought about it much since I came to those conclusions. And in fact, I did spend part of yesterday trying to go through boxes that I had packed up a year ago when I moved house to try and find my dissertation, and also get a digital copy to reread my conclusions. But certainly some of the stuff that was felt at industry at the time has become true and is still the case in my view.
Yeah, and it would seem that a sort of two-tier industry has almost emerged. You know, those companies who work in a digital process and those who continue to pursue paper-based processes. But tell us a little bit about the Scottish Futures Trust and what it is and what your role is in that regard.
Sure. So I moved to Scottish Futures Trust just over a year ago. Prior to that, I'd been a sort of BIM consultant in the UK for 5+ years. It was a move I wanted to make for various reasons, which we might touch on over the course of our conversation today. I had worked with Scottish Futures Trust on and off through my BIM consultancy work, and also had supported their BIM delivery plan, which they had launched as well 3 or 4 years ago, leading BIM in Scotland for Scottish Government. But when I joined a year ago, and moving into public sector, it was definitely a shift for me, and it has taken me maybe a bit of a while to adjust to how public sector operates, and and some of the complexities and challenges which they face from a client's perspective in terms of how they deliver and projects and also manage existing assets. But SFT as an organisation is, some people, particularly in our circles, know SFT through the work they've done around BIM Level 2 within Scotland, but it's quite a big organisation. Over 70 plus people, sort of quite high level professionals work within it, and they really deliver infrastructure for the Scottish Government, and that covers all sorts of things in terms of energy, 4G, 5G networks, new housing, and also all new sort of schools, hospitals, all the various hubs have been set up. Yeah, they're really there as a delivery vehicle, but also in terms of the work that they do in providing good practice and guidelines and better ways of working for both the public sector and obviously for the private sector in delivering that.
So, I mean, just maybe for the listeners that don't know the Scottish Futures Trust, is it that they sit above the procuring authorities like the Department of Transport, Department of Education, etc., and support the procuring authorities, or is Scottish Futures Trust a procuring authority in itself?
Well, it's obviously Scotland's devolved government. It's not so much things like Department of Education, Department of Transport per se. Obviously, there's like the Scottish Water. For example, at the moment, there's a new £1 billion schools programme. So, yeah, new schools are delivered essentially through sort of programmes, of which local authorities are the contracting authority on those. And in terms of SFT and their role, they sort of help deliver that. They set up and deliver the programme on behalf of Scottish Government and working with local authorities to achieve that through various routes and procurement routes and delivery mechanisms. So they definitely are. They're supporting in both, and also an operating arm to delivering sort of new infrastructure within Scotland, and obviously the likes of NHS Scotland supporting them in what they're doing in terms of their own sort of digital estates and digital construction sort of project delivery side of things.
That's really interesting. And, I suppose when you think of procurement and government procurement and all the legislation that controls that, people might think that, within that environment, how can you see innovation growing, where things are so tightly regulated and controlled, and what view of innovation and bringing innovation to the market would SFT and your colleagues have within that sort of procurement environment?
With, I guess, delivering programs, the opportunity exists to bring together supply chains and best practice, and obviously through that you get consistency, standardized approach of how perhaps things are designed or delivered. Within that context, there's an opportunity for better collaboration, knowledge sharing, and through that, I guess, innovation as well. There's touch points within that. So, for example, the schools programme, there would be certain requirements that each school would need to achieve, whether it's an energy target or adoption of BIM, as an example. So there's opportunities for innovation to happen in those sort of touch points through early engagement with the supply chain as well, and bringing in people who are working within that sort of field to provide early input into that, how the designs or the project delivery, et cetera, can evolve.
I suppose, and that's interesting about delivery programs, because obviously, I'm sure you have a similar problem in Scotland that we have in Ireland, is that we're almost unable to deliver the infrastructure that we need, even though we would consider ourselves a first world country. We're struggling to deliver housing, we're struggling to deliver the schools we need, the healthcare facilities, which are under increasing pressure now, and all the other infrastructure. Are you having the similar problems in Scotland with that the delivery of building infrastructure is just too expensive, too slow, too cumbersome, or are you meeting all your needs?
Well, there's always challenges, there's always need, isn't there? And there's never enough money to go around and deliver everything. So, as an example, one of the initiatives, which obviously, I don't know if you are aware, but the Scottish Government have set themselves quite a sort of early target to achieve zero carbon on projects. I think it's a few years earlier, maybe, than the rest of the UK. So obviously there's many different contributors to that at a society level, but one aspect of that is obviously new infrastructure and project delivery, but also another part of that is looking at the existing estates and can we better manage and understand how we operate our existing estates and reduce carbon that way. So in terms of provision and having enough projects to sustain what is required, there's also the opportunity of looking at our existing estates and existing infrastructure and how can we better operate and manage those more efficiently to, one, reduce carbon and be more efficient in terms of performance, etc. So it's also looking at it from that perspective, that we're not just constantly building new schools and new hospitals, but can we better deliver what we need for society, looking at both sides of it, both the new and the old.
Those are the big challenges, aren't they? Because as you say, there's finite resources in terms of budgets, but then you have increasing needs. So we've got to look at doing things quicker and cheaper, but at the same time, you don't want to do that by diminishing the quality of buildings because they've got to meet these high performance standards in terms of energy, etc. So, just the way we build, we need to become more sustainable in the use of materials and resources. So big challenges, I suppose, and it's an industry that really needs innovation. And I suppose one of the reasons John and I sort of set up this group is to start talking more about innovation, because traditionally the construction sector hasn't invested a lot of time and money into R&D. So it's it's a very small percentage time and effort goes into formal R&D. I suppose there's always innovation and research happening on projects, but often the outcomes of that research are sort of locked in that project and don't get distributed across the sector. I mean, does the SFT have a role in that regard, in that you're working with many different local authorities and procuring authorities, and somehow you can get the lessons learned from a broad group of projects and bring that together and feed it back to
very much. Yeah, I mean, through delivering programs, you've got that opportunity, haven't you, that you can bring together local authorities as contracting authorities to really, obviously not every local authority or public sector organisation have got different needs and there's different context and et cetera. So not every solution is going to fit everybody's requirements per se. But yeah, in terms of best practice and approach, and also how you design and construct and deliver projects, also sustains sort of local and regional SMEs in terms of services and supporting local businesses as well. So it's that sort of whole life cycle approach, isn't it? But also sustaining the socio-economic side of it, that the approach that you take and you cascade that across, that it's got exponential benefits beyond just the project itself. So yeah, but in addition to that, we do have that opportunity to capture lessons learned and feed that back in. And just a lot of the work some of the work that I was doing in my first year was just to capture some of the best practice which is out there, not just BIM per se, but also just more around technology within the construction sector, and creating some case studies for that, which we host on the new infrastructure technology Navigator, which is worth going to have a look at if you haven't seen it already, because it's really it's there as a resource to support public sector and more broadly industry to really look at how technology can be an enabler as opposed to just picking it as a solution, and how it supports all the other bits that you want to achieve in terms of your objectives or what benefits you want to achieve through technology.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan. What was the name of that platform you mentioned?
It's Infrastructure Technology Navigator. Infratech Navigator. Yeah, if you just Google that.
Okay, and is this a publicly available tool?
Yeah, it's a free to use tool. It looks at obviously people, processes, the benefits, and there's a good range of benefits that you can identify, and then you can sort of look at the stage that you want those benefits to be realised, and you can then sort of shape that around in terms of what the technology solutions are to attain that benefit. So it's a resource that said it's free to use. There's also within it sort of scopes of service, best practice of how you would achieve that. And the idea is that we expand that going forward and obviously build the case studies around that to show how those benefits are being realised.
So who would be the user, the customer to this platform?
I mean, it's primarily been set up to support public sector clients within Scotland, but equally, it's there just for everybody to use, as is all the sort of resources that are on the SFT portal. SFT's role is about supporting public sector and getting best value for both client and government, but also it's there to support industry and achieving that.
I think it's one of the marked differences between, if you're just looking at the UK and Scotland, a lot of effort has been put in to develop those tools, the BIM level to support industry, understanding that predominantly the industry's SMEs that won't have the ability to do those things. Whereas if you look at the UK or England, they've kind of said, look, you have to do this, but they didn't really give industry much in terms of a set of tools to work with. So it's been it's just been a marked difference between those two jurisdictions, I think.
Yeah, I think the focus is
looking from the outside.
Yeah. I mean, the focus, I think, obviously a lot of that good work was done before I joined SFT, but I was aware of it when it was being developed. I was working quite, as I said, I'd been working with SFT in and out on a couple of different sort of smaller projects, and it was a good sort of, it is a good resource for clients, as I said, to go in and really understand. I guess, yeah, it's about how you sell it to, I guess, that level within public sector and just even generally within private sector. How you sell what you're trying to do, whether it's BIM or introducing a new technology or a process at that boardroom level. The people who are making those decisions that maybe don't really want to get into the nitty gritty or technical detail. They just want to know, what is it? What am I going to get out of it? And what are the benefits? And how much is it going to cost me as well? So a lot of the tools that Paul had within SFT had developed was very much focusing around the benefits and being able to make it an easy entry for clients to go in and really input what they need and really get some sort of output in terms of what they should be focusing on or what they should be asking for from their supply chain, or do they even need to dive into the deep end of BIM level 2, but is there more of an incremental approach to it depending on the type of project, scale of project, etc., where the old sort of BIM level 1 setup were just getting good naming conventions, getting a good sort of folder structure or common data environment in place, the bedrock of good standardized and structured information delivery. That then would allow you to springboard into better collaboration and the realization of BIM level 2, which is obviously now ISO 19650, and sort of good digital information management.
The other thing that I find quite impressive about Scotland is the Construction Innovation Centre, focused purely on looking at innovations within construction sector. Is there any link between SFT and the Construction Innovation Centre? Yeah,
so there's no direct link in terms of how it's set up, but there is a linkage in terms of how we collaborate with each other. The Innovation Centre in its own entity is set up to look at, there's opportunities for innovation within the supply side of industry, and also how they can then link up with academic partners to really create those solutions that then can be obviously shared around the wider industry off the back of that. So, and in addition to that, they obviously looking at other things such as offsite manufacture. There's quite an amazing factory that's set up that you can go in and you can do prototyping, 3D printing or whatever. To at an SME level, you could really go in with a good idea, get some funding and start to prototype something up, or a proof of concept. So yeah, it's an excellent resource, and and the fact that you have that academic link as well, you can start to pull in some of the research which is going on around you, obviously various universities within Scotland, and using that to either inform or to validate whatever it is you're doing, and obviously trying to make sure you've got a product or a solution which is obviously scalable and can be used by others. So it's an excellent resource which is available for the construction sector.
Yeah. And so given your career, like you've been at the cutting edge, I suppose, of technologies, even with your work now, as what you're saying with SFT, or really pushing the boundaries in terms of procurement and working with the local authorities, etc. You've also ran a few hackathons, so you're obviously a person who likes to explore and innovation. And tell us a little bit about your hackathon group and what that's.
Yeah, so when I was a consultant and working sort of up and down, spending my time between London and Edinburgh in the private sector, and when I was in Edinburgh, I shared a desk in an office with Darren Lester from Specified By. He at that time he'd got an office, and the two of us used to just sort of chat afterwards over a beer, sometimes on a Friday, and really chew the fat in terms of industry, what was happening, what were the blockers. And yeah, so there was all sorts of discussion around interoperability, the big sort of software giants who were operating within our industry, and really then more broadly about innovation and how you can how you can start to maybe unearth different ways. I describe them as gold nuggets of innovation. How do you find those that are not through normal practice or coming out of maybe some of the big consultants or tier ones? And it was also just explore the approach where we could look beyond our own industry and almost cross-fertilize and engage with other industries. Now, this is probably going back maybe 3-4 years ago, and our industry has dramatically changed since then. And it is a lot more fluid in terms of, in my view, in terms of bringing in new technologies that have developed in other industries. But I was just thinking beyond the norm and creating a space really where people could come in from different sectors over the course of a weekend and really debrand themselves and take themselves out of their professional context and relax and just really explore. And whether it was a set challenge, whether they stuck to that, but really, just about exploring within a different setting with different people. And what we found was that it was quite surprising. The first one we held was in Glasgow, and it was supported by Innovate UK, the Innovation Centre. We also had Flux. BIM Launcher was coming up, I think, as well to that, John.
Yeah, we were there.
You were called something else before BIM Launcher, I think.
Jenka. Jenka.
So, I mean, it was amazing to see to feel the energy and to see what came out of that. And what you got really were heating engineers or structural engineers who were in their late 40s, early 50s, and they were sitting down and engaging with young coders and data scientists who were just either in university or coming out of the university, or who were finding their way within our industry. And really, just engaging and come up with some really amazing stuff. So everybody, by the time it came to Sunday evening, felt really rewarded, just looking to know when the next one was, and it was passionate, and everyone got so much out of it. So we done the first one as a trial. It was quite hard work. We organised it ourselves. We organised the catering, set it all up, so it was really tiring. But from that point on, we tried to explore how we could now expand that into industry. So we started to talk to some of the professional institutes, and it was through the .be group, which I was also part of. We got to talk with a guy called Bobby Chakrabarty, who was also in the .be group, was also at the time president of APS, and he wanted to do a hackathon around health and safety, and that was just around the time the Part 6 came out. So we done another hackathon on digital construction and health and safety in Manchester, which was again over a weekend and was really rewarding. And more recently we done a joint APS and Institute of Engineering and Technology, IIT, hackathon, which looked at the Hackett report, fire safety, and trying to find innovative ways of trying to approach that golden thread of information or improve better in fire safety or digital records or health and safety, etc., etc. And that was a two-part approach. We brought in experts or people who were in that space within industry to come in and almost do a debrief, data capture, and then we used that to really inform and shape the hackathon, which happened 4 months later in London at IET HQ. So I really have enjoyed doing those sort of events, and it's quite interesting when you organise that and push it out. The people who turn up aren't the usual people you'd expect to turn up. They're the different folk. If that makes sense. They're not usual the UK BIM crew sort of guys and girls who come along, or it's a different sort of scene, and it sort of has validated that what if if we look beyond our sort of status quo or how as industry we've been on our BIM journey and who's been involved in that, if you look beyond the borders and the frontiers and bring in other people, or the people who are just operating and just, who've got busy lives, they're just doing their day jobs but can afford some time to do this as a one-off. Those people are the knowledge they have and the skill sets, for me, is where when you sort of overlap those boundaries, that's where the innovation comes out, and it's not the people who you might think it is. That makes sense.
And what do you think of that sort of hackathon model? Do you feel that those innovative ideas that come out of the hackathon continue, or is it just sort of it lives for the event and maybe they could continue or maybe they don't? And, I mean, it's one of the things John and I have been discussing a lot. It was a feeling that maybe those hackathons, they're good for the event, but then those ideas don't get taken further.
Yeah.
What's your feeling about that?
I agree. It's a real frustration of mine, and something I've struggled with after these events, where the people who have spent their time, inputted their knowledge into come up with good solutions, maybe slightly frustrated at the fact that it's difficult to carry that on. And also for us who were organising those events and facilitating them in our own time, we don't have that ability to, as in a sort of full-time or funded context, to take that forward and really develop that up into proper sort of solutions that could really work exponentially at an industry level. Our hope and we were quite sincere around the idea of it being open, that whatever was produced was for the greater good of the construction industry and could happen exponentially. So yeah, it's a hard thing to do, to take it forward and to really to make something of it, and it does require proper resource, time and funding.
What's interesting as I listened to you, and what Ralph mentioned earlier, was that AecHive have done a hackathon, we called Swarm, so it's like a hackathon type model. What we actually did was a very open-ended event, so different people could come and, you know, work on various different aspects of the industry. We had people one person working on a design system for a prefab modular pod. And then we had on managing safety files, and there was a whole combination of different things going on by the sounds of things, your journey, you started off where we were. You took the next step, which was working with the fire. I forget the name of the
professional institutes.
And by the sounds of things, it was quite a bit more organized. You had your input data, you had the context, a very fixed context. You had almost sync for that innovation, which was the Fire Institute. And I'm wondering, do you think that working closely with specialized group focused on one aspect of the entire construction process, do you think that could be leveraged for anything more? And do you think that we could almost use that as an opportunity to bring the hackathon model as it stands today into something more where, you know, we can start projects and potentially further fund them and bring them to industry?
There's a couple of things, isn't there? That's right. Even if something's produced and it's open, I think it needs to be open, and there's obviously a discussion around what is open. For me, it has to have exponential value beyond the project level, if that makes sense. You could do hackathons which are more tech orientated, you might find in the tech industry, which are coming up with sort of quick win solutions that could help something deliver more efficiently, more better, more quicker on a project, or support a process or whatever. Yeah, I think, that's good. But there's a bigger prize to be won, I think, in that it would be great. And that's why we did engage with the institutes as well, because there's still parts of our industry that they've become more digital in their thinking and their awareness and how they guess what they're putting out there is, how they're working. But it's I guess it's all still quite siloed in my mind, in that if industry were able to come together and come up with a solution, for example, what happened at Grenfell and the Hackett report and what we tried to do at our hackathon with the IET. But if we were able to bring maybe a couple of those silos together, work collaboratively, and it's not just about but tech being the enabler to that, and it's finding a solution which works right across for the whole of industry, as opposed to maybe a solution being more bureaucratic, if that makes sense. Yeah. Or if it is bureaucratic, there's transparency that becomes part of that process through using technology or the solutions that come out of that. And I would like to see it more of as an initiative that's supported by a number of bodies and organisations, that the outcomes of that is shared exponentially across the whole of industry. Because what we also found was that even some of the teams who might have had good solutions, they may work for an existing consultancy firm or contractor, and for them then to take that forward into a product per se, they either have to leave their job and do it themselves, or they have to then bring it back into the organisation they work for, and if they get buy-in, then it's developed as their product or their solution. So I don't know if that answers your question, John, but I think my vision is, my hope would be that industry can come together. We're a very passionate industry, but we're also very protective and precious. And I do believe now, in where we are, and even through what's happened with COVID and the lockdown, there is proof now that technology does work better for us. But are we making it work better for us? And what I mean is, for example, speaking with, I've been non-stop on Teams meetings, like a lot of other people who I speak to. And so the technology is able to communicate a lot better and a lot more efficiently, but is it giving us more time to be more productive? If that makes sense. So I guess what I'm getting at is that I think if we're looking at hackathons as a model and technology as a solution or enabler, it needs to have lots of different people coming into that with a vision to create a solution that achieves benefits and is of exponential value across industry, not just a fix.
I think there's a fine balance, really, the sort of openness of a hackathon model where people, it's a safe environment, and you're not going to do any harm to anybody or any project. And as you said, Ryan, you can get out of your day-to-day job for a weekend and just let your mind open and come up with weird and wonderful ideas. But then then it has to become formalized somehow and systematic. That if you want those innovations to continue, they have to be managed and controlled and resourced and funded, and because you can't just achieve great things over a weekend.
Yeah.
So there is some balance there that has to be met, and maybe organizations that have resources. Maybe organizations that have resources might support these hackathon events with the aim of then maybe taking those projects on board in a more formal way and taking them further. But as somebody who's in looking at innovation and sort of being heavily involved in innovation, what excites you about the industry where it's at the moment, and what frustrates you?
Good question. I think our industry has come a long way. If I reflect back to what we said at the outset of our conversation, of where BIM was sort of 8 or 9 years ago, even what the definition of it was and where we are now, I think BIM has been people have arguments of whether we achieve what we set out to do. I think that journey is still happening. It might be slightly refined or in a slightly different direction, but when you start on a journey, you might have an end goal, but it mightn't be the end point where you end up. But it's definitely brought us to a point where, as new technologies evolve in other industries and other sectors, that we've been able to adopt and integrate those to find value within those and how we can make our processes and our delivery mechanisms better and get benefits out of that. And I think if we think of the setup in the UK at the moment, the UK BIM framework, which is the UK BIM Alliance, BSI and CDBB, I think that's as an umbrella, that's a great setup where we've got somebody like the CDBB looking at digital twins and the future and direction of where our industry is going. But then at the other side, on the sort of the back end, we've got the UK BIM Alliance, which is in association with BSI, looking at the standards and the guidance to support industry, not leaving industry behind, but bringing them on that journey as well. So I think where we've evolved in the shape of things now is, and the structure of that is really good and is really positive. So yeah, it's an exciting time. I think that our industry is at a point where we can better embrace technology and take some leadership around that. We need to be, and I know there's lots of discussions around this, around data and good structured information management per se, but I think we need to also look at some of the software or product offerings that exist out there at the moment and maybe look at those and how they could be better, evolve better to be more open. Obviously, as things move to the cloud, there's that opportunity to be able to connect different data sets or databases or different systems together and allow information to pass through, so we can, as a I guess as an industry or even as a sector can get benefits from that. But I think there's still some work to be done around that. There needs to be maybe another sort of an evolution of what's on offer at the moment to allow that to happen, so that we don't just move into a cloud-based approach or working, but we're still siloed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think if we can find ways of unlocking that.
If you think of other sectors, there's like the IT sector, or whatever, companies have R&D budgets for their innovation, and whereas when you think of the AEC sector, you don't hear architectural companies or engineering companies or construction companies talking about R&D budgets. Not often anyway.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, architects, engineers, and contractors are sort of ideally suited for innovation because they're solving problems all the time. They're coming up with new solutions all the time.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Ryan.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
I went to auto lockdown, sleep mode on the Surface Pro. Did you want to go back over that again, Ralph?
Well, I was just saying, based on what you were saying there, that the AEC sector doesn't seem to invest a lot of informal innovation, and yet architects, engineers, and contractors are continuously solving problems on projects all the time. As an industry, the people operating in that industry are suited to conduct formal innovation, but you don't often hear of companies within the AEC sector having sort of formal R&D budgets. So the innovation is happening. It's probably happening at project level, and so just in your experience, either in the private sector where you worked before or now in the public sector, do you see companies sort of having those discussions that we must dedicate a portion of our revenue to formal innovation and R&D, or just let's see what happens?
Yeah, it's a tough question, isn't it? It's not something that's really factored into project budgets as percentage of it being dedicated to R&D. Certainly within public sector, that's a challenge. I've definitely seen it in the private sector, maybe among some of the developers in London, over the past number of years, where they did invest in BIM in the early days to get some of those rewards. You do see it R&D, and it has happened, maybe within tier ones and within some of the bigger consultancy firms who have initially invested heavily on getting themselves up to speed and delivering BIM per se, then realizing it's more about digital transformation even within their own organizations and the benefits they can achieve through that way of working and investing in that context. And I get that that's great, and it keeps them, I guess, afoot and ahead of their position against other competitors in the industry as well. But beyond that, there's, as I said, there's been lots of good. There's maybe a topic close to your heart, John, as well, around CDEs and the like, and other platforms that are capturing data at the moment and are holding them and with sort of functionality in terms of tools around that which clients can use. It's where are those going to go in the longer term? Because in fact, clients could still be essentially trapped, perhaps, in those are maybe siloed to some extent. And it's looking beyond at a sector level. How can the data that we produce along the way be stored and accessible in such a way that a wider range of stakeholders throughout the life cycle can engage and contribute to that? Cloud-based technologies and interactivity is the obvious route to that, but what is the interfaces? Do we have lots of solutions that are cloud-based but are still locked in, if that makes sense? Or do we look at it, flip it inside out a bit, and we have cloud-based arenas that are full of project and sectoral information that's managed by clients or organizations per se, and you interact through tools into that, depending on who you are as a stakeholder. That's how I sort of see things, or it should be evolving, because clients, certainly within the public sector, even within the first year of SFT, there's some real challenges there. Clients have real issues about, one, procuring technology, the right technology, but then that technology being suitable for more than just one function, and they need solutions that is more broader and extends beyond the point of handover of their buildings, especially if we start to look at digital twins and all that sort of good stuff, and where does that information exist beyond the point of handover, and clients are becoming more aware that they need to be front end in terms of how they specify information and having ownership of that and managing that, particularly as we've seen what's come out of the Hackett report, and their responsibilities in keeping records of their assets for the whole life cycle. So yeah, in terms of innovation, I think that's a bit of an untapped space at the moment, and it's something that could be, I'd like to see how that evolves.
Yeah. Like in Ireland, for instance, on public procurement, we have a policy of 1% of the project budget goes to art. So included in public sector projects, there'll be some artwork, or so it'd be great if we develop policy around innovation that maybe a percentage of the project budget is dedicated to R&D work that can be developed, and as you said earlier, maybe developed within a project team environment, but shared across or back to the broader industry.
Yeah, I agree.
So
that'd be a good idea. It's a good idea.
We probably need some government policy on innovation.
Well, as I said, I think it's my work within SFT. Why I enjoy what I do within SFT is really to help clients get on that journey in terms of information management, as opposed to clients being outside the arena, but being more centre in the arena and knowing what they want and why they need it. And it's specific to whatever their strategic objectives are, whether it's at an organizational level, it could be to do with performance or energy or whatever, but also benefits that are specific for that project and the users. And it's not just about a post-occupancy evaluation report, an O&M manual that's really not fit for purpose. It's knowing at the start why you're doing something, how the data and information that you're getting can validate that, and the data that's captured after the point of handover either reinforces that your strategic objectives are still aligned, or you change either that or you change the way the building operates, or an adaptation of that, and that data exponentially can be used right across the whole sector for as lessons learned or to improve how you do something the next time around. I just think that transparency it's very difficult at the moment, and a lot of us to do with, it's not that there's a want there, there is a want there, but it's how do you unlock that so it's part of the process, so it's not an extra thing to do, it's not a difficult thing to do, it's just naturally what comes out of the process. I think we're, not just, clients not need hand held, but they need some support in that, and there, there's good work going on at the moment around ISO and the guidance and everything like that to see that, but it's another level beyond that for those who are not very technical. How it's also about communication and how they know what they want, but they just need given something to just achieve that, as opposed to having to have a technical understanding of the intricacies of it, of how they go about it, whether it's process or data structures or data file formats, etc.
We've come to the hour, and John, did you have any final questions or remarks?
None that's going to fit within this hour anyway. We might leave it at that. Just like to thank Ryan for coming on as well on behalf of myself and the AecHive, and I'm sure the community will be really delighted to hear from you. And I was wondering if anyone wants to reach out to you, what would be the best place for them to do so, Ryan?
I'm on Twitter, but not on Twitter. If that makes sense. And probably LinkedIn is a good way in.
I'll put the links in the description.
Much appreciated.
From my side, Ryan, I just wanted to say thanks as well. It was excellent. You've had a fantastic journey in a career, and the work you're doing sounds amazing. And we obviously like to stay in touch, keep in touch with what you're doing, both at SFT, but also through your Hack Construct group, and keep the conversation about innovation going.
Yeah, definitely. And what you guys are doing, big supporter of that. And if there's, as we've already talked about just now, how we can maybe, or I can maybe support that going forward as well. I'm keen to carry that discussion on with you as well. We need to keep talking.
I'm sure we'll be talking again, and appreciate your time and your input to the podcast.